Good morning, everyone. Welcome. My name is Roger Snyder, and I'm the VP of Marketing at 280 Group. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Today, we're discussing the 10 keys to unlocking a winning product team. And I'm joined today by Jen Cano. Jen began the dance between marketing and product management in 2003 and has made a career of leading by influence. Today, she is Vice President of Product at Elsevier, a global digital media company. In this role, she drives product strategy and vision for solutions in the healthcare industry. Thank you for being with us today, Jen.
Great to be here. Excited about this topic.
Yeah, me too. I'm very excited that you were able to join us. Thank you so much. It was a great opportunity, given that you also just recently talked with Mira Wooten about your evolution as a product management leader. I encourage people to check out the blog post that Mira wrote all about Jen. And you're getting ready for a big move, as I recall, right?
Yeah, we're going to move coast to coast from Pennsylvania to Oregon.
Wow. So even though the slide says you're in Philadelphia, that's not going to last for much longer, right?
No, my weeks are numbered.
And I'm based in Scotts Valley, California at the moment, so we're bi-coastal right now. So let's jump into the topic here. Before we get going, a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, we encourage you to stay engaged with the product management community by joining our LinkedIn group on product management leadership. Now more than ever, it's an important time to feel connected and to have a community to work with. So use this forum for getting together and seeing how you can get together with challenges, how you can support each other. And I'll paste the URL into the chat box so that you can join this LinkedIn group. Let me grab that and move on to the next slide. As always, we will want a lot of interaction with our audience this morning, so I encourage you to find the questions box and type your questions in as they come up so that we're able to see your questions ahead of time. And then at the end, we will spend some time being able to go through as many questions as we possibly can. All right, now, number one question is always, can I watch this webinar later? And the answer is yes. We will send you a follow-up email after the webinar, and that will include some handy resources as well as a link to this webinar so that you can watch it again. All right. Now, before we get into the meat of the topic, let me talk a little bit about 280 Group. We are all about empowering product managers and product marketers with the knowledge and tools to build products that matter. Products that matter to your customers, products that matter to your company, products that matter to the world, hopefully, if you're really working on exciting stuff. The products that matter is what we are really focused on. If you need help improving your skills or your team skills, we offer a variety of different services. We provide online live training. We provide self-study training courses. We can get together with your leadership team and help optimize your overall program, looking at your people, your process, and your tools. So for more information, check us out at 280group.com. All right, we're truly excited to be in this leadership series, and we love being able to help you. Today, we're talking about how do you both, it's kind of a cross-functional one here. We're going to be both how to transform your team is going to be a part of this topic, and how do you develop yourself as a product management leader. All right, let's dive into this a little bit more by understanding our audience. So today we have a nice split. We've got 27% of our audience are product management leadership of one sort or another. 37% are product managers or product marketing managers. We have a larger number of other than usual, and I was interested in that. I didn't have time to dig into some of the details there, but hopefully maybe in the chat box you can tell us a little bit more about, maybe if you don't have a traditional product management background, tell us a little bit more about yourselves that way. All right. Let's move into the meat of our topic today. And today we're talking about how do we influence team culture. But I'd like to kind of get us understanding of where people are at in our audience in terms of their understanding of team culture. So let me launch our first poll. We're going to come over here to this other screen. And here we go. So, question is, how well do you understand team culture? Do you have kind of just a vague understanding of what team culture is? Or do you recognize what a good one is when you see it? Or is it more like, yeah, I know what it is, but not really how do I actually put my hands on the tiller and guide it myself. Or you know what it is and you know how to shape it. And I don't know, Jen, maybe earlier in your career, how did you kind of feel about this topic?
Yeah, I think that I have gone through the entire spectrum of this. And I still think, even on that last one, I know what it is and how I can shape it. I think I know what it is, and I think I know some of how I can shape it, but I think this is a lifelong learning, right?
Mm-hmm.
How
Yeah,
to impact culture.
no, it's a great point. Absolutely. All right, well, we've gotten over 60% of our audience to respond, so let's take a look at our results. Interesting, I'm not seeing the results. Oh, here they are. All right, so 4% said kind of, I only have a vague understanding of it. 24%, I recognize a good one when I see it. 50%, that's pretty cool. This is the center of gravity. Know what it is, but not are sure how to guide it. And then 22% know what it is and know how to shape it. So this is great because I think we're going to give you some real concrete tips on how do you go about guiding this culture. All right, I am now going to hide the poll so we can continue. Let's dive into this. So most of the audience seemed to kind of know what team culture was, but let's be sure that we're all operating from the same basic understanding, right? And I took two different quotes here from Inc. as well as from Wikipedia, and I kind of highlighted some of the things that are in both definitions. And I like this visual as well because it also points out the fact that it's about values and attitudes. It's about some fundamental assumptions and beliefs. It's about then behaviors and the environment, right? And those behaviors spring from these underlying attitudes and assumptions. I don't know, Jen, if you have some thoughts about this as well in terms of just kind of helping people get a more concrete understanding of what culture is.
Yeah, so, I would say probably a good 10 years ago or so, maybe even more, I started studying about company culture. I looked at Zappos and some other companies that are really famous for building a
Hmm.
culture that is just stellar, right? And the thing that they point out over and over again is that team culture is not top down. We don't dictate culture, we don't create culture, we influence culture as leaders, right? And that, I think, is the most important thing to understand. So later when we talk about influence, we talk about some of those other things. That's a really important part of influencing that culture. So I would say that was probably my number one learning early on about culture. Just how can I influence that culture, and how can I empower the team to run with it and to enrich that culture?
Right. Yeah. I remember when I first became a leader, this was a challenge for me as well, because suddenly now I was responsible for this. And I didn't even kind of realize for a while that I was the one who would be setting that tone, right? As a leader, how I behaved was going to influence how the rest of the team operated and how the rest of the team behaved. So it was a big wake up call for me, that's for sure. So why does team culture matter, right? Oftentimes folks think, well, it's really more important to just know that we have the right process in place, to make sure that we've got the right skills on our team. And those are absolutely important. And let's face it, 280 Group spends a lot of our time and energy helping teams get better that way. But here are a couple of quotes about the fact that team culture is an amazingly powerful aspect of what it means to be an effective product management team. You know, an essential component, ultimate success or failure, right? And Gartner talks about it in terms of transformations, that it's almost more important that this culture is the right culture, more important than business strategy, to make sure that your business grows and transforms.
Yeah, I think a good example of that, of culture of an organization sometimes being more important than the business strategy. Let's take, for example, an agile principle of fail fast, right?
Mm-hmm.
We
Mm-hmm.
don't have a culture that embraces our ability to do lean incremental delivery so that we can learn quick and fail small.
Right.
That means
Right.
that we risk, because we don't have that culture that accepts failure, we risk really big failure later.
Mm-hmm. No, it's a very good point. And as many times as I failed as a leader early in my leadership career, it's important to get that vibe going that it's okay, right? And to be transparent about that as well, definitely. So the part that folks reflected in the survey earlier that they were probably least familiar with was, how do I go about making a change in my team culture or enabling the kind of team culture that I'm looking for? And that's why I brought up this framework from Gartner that talks about the 4 attributes of business culture. And I'm going to talk about each one of them in a little bit more emphasis here. So first of all, how you make decisions in your organization, first starting with your team, and then as you expand it out to like how you run your product management core teams is very important. And there's multiple dimensions to this. One of them that I called out was this sense of velocity versus analysis. Are you going to do a really deep, thorough 3-month study before you come out with anything? Or are you going to move a little faster, right? And you were just talking about Agile, Jen, right? And so that would fly in the face of Agile today, certainly. But I did work for a military contractor for a couple of years. And in that case, there were so many rules and regulations that you had to comply with, and you didn't want to kill anyone with a product, quite literally and effectively. So sometimes you do work in an industry where you've got to be very, very careful and thoughtful in your analysis. I think most of our audience probably though is more towards we want to make quick decisions, we want to make thoughtful decisions, but we want to make quick decisions. So you're going to set that tone. I don't know if you want to comment on that one. On each one of these, you can chime in. The second one is how we engage. And this is about sort of the softer side, if you will, as a team, how you collaborate together, what your communication style is, what your expectations are. And the way you do this internally with your group is going to also then reflect on how your product managers communicate externally as well. So, for example, as a product management leader, if I insist that we use Asana or Jira or something as one of our communication tools, and that we do write things down. Yes, we're fast. We want to move at agile pace, but we still take a moment to write a sentence or a paragraph every week about the progress that we're making. If I set that tone, then the rest of my product managers are going to start doing the same thing in terms of how they communicate with the rest of their teams. That's just one example of what we're talking about in terms of collaboration styles.
I love that you're pointing out too that this this model has, it has both, the soft skills and more quantitative, more, metric-driven pieces to it. I really like that blend. I had not seen this model before. I'm really excited to have folded our each of our sections into this model. I think it works really well when we talk about how we're going to turn these ideas into something practical that we can actually do. And I'm looking forward to that part.
As you're looking at business culture, one of the things is it seems so amorphous. So I wanted to try about a framework that allows people to have something to hang their ideas onto, right? And the third one here then is, how do we go about measuring success, right? And that's not just company and product KPIs, but also how do you measure success as a team? And we'll talk a little bit about that in the subsequent slides. But it's important that how you go about measuring success in multiple dimensions is a part of what you think about as you're trying to form a successful team culture. And then the last part of this is, how do you work as a team? This is kind of the nuts and bolts, practices, processes. I put out budgets, and we're going to talk about this several times, because in my career, before I was a leader, I was a product manager on a team, and one of my product management directors said, we really need to understand our customers really, really well. And I was like, okay, great. So I'd like to go, and at that time I was working on wireless carriers were our customers, right? And so there's only 5 or 6 of them at the time. There's fewer now, but there's 5 or 6 of them at the time. So I go, well, I want to fly to Kansas City and spend a few days with my customer so I can get a deeper understanding of their needs. Oh, and then my leader's like, well, we don't have a budget for that. So if your spoken words are, we got to deeply understand our customer, but then your actual support for making that happen isn't there, then is that really your team culture, right? So that's one of the other challenges here.
Yep, and I think right along with that is we get what we incentivize, right? And so if we think about budgets kind of like that and the support kind of like that, we don't get what we don't support.
That's right, absolutely. All right, so now let's dive into the actual 10 keys, and we're going to come back to this idea of the team culture framework as we talk about them all. Now, when Jen and I originally came up with this topic, we came up with these 10 keys, kind of collaborated together and thought about over the course of our careers in leadership, what were the things that mattered most? How did we then kind of consolidate them? And we came up with these 10 keys. And as we did this, we came to the conclusion that there was no way we were going to be able to cover this topic in the depth that we wanted to cover it and be able to give everybody a chance to kind of let it all soak in. So we decided to split this webinar into 2 parts. So today we're going to cover part 1, these first 5 topics: how to start and end with a customer, how to lead with influence, how to stay curious, how to focus on outcomes and not effort, and how to be expert. So we're going to dive deep on those first 5. And then we're going to go into a second part next month on what do we do to support that leap from imagining to doing. And I love that phrasing. That was one of Jen's ideas. I love that. Don't be afraid to fail. We already talked a little bit about failing fast. Be a trusted partner as a leader of product management across various different parts of the organization. How to enable ownership. And lastly, how to instill a sense of servant leadership. Because as a product manager, you are serving not only your customer, but all the other teams that you're working with, as much as they are a part of the team building up this product for you. So those are the 2 parts, and we're going to cover today, part 1, these 5 topics. So let's dive into the topics one by one. I also want to pause for a moment and just encourage everybody to be asking questions in the question box as they come up. The first couple were already in here in terms of will the recording be available? And the answer is absolutely. We'll send you an email afterwards that gives you a link to be able to watch the recording. We don't normally share the slides. There's copyrighted material in here, and there's material in here from some of our courses. So we don't normally share the slides themselves, but we do share the recording. And then you can be able to view those slides as we're going through that. All right, let's dive in. Number 1. Starting and ending with a customer. And this is something that I repeat almost every topic in every webinar, that we need to understand our customers deeply, right? We need to understand their needs and we need to understand their wants, because with those 2 things, if we understand their problems, this is what we call being in the problem space. If we understand their problems, then we can look to our products, our services, and see whether we have solutions that will meet those needs, meet those wants. And if not, how do we go about making sure that we do those things so customers actually are going to buy our product, use our service, right? We then have the need to also make sure we understand why are they buying and when are they buying, right? Trying to sell Christmas wrapping paper in February, maybe not be the best time to try to sell that product, right? So there's multiple factors, timing being one of them, the one I just mentioned, that are important in terms of when are people going to buy and how. When you're doing B2B, for example, it could be that you need to be, if you're selling software or services that are helping with taxes, for example, for corporate taxes, then knowing the timing of when that's important to a corporation, when are they going to consider upgrading their infrastructure in order for their next tax cycle, means that, again, you're going to look at the timing of when is the best time for me to spend my precious advertising budget? When is it going to be the best time for me to release a new version of my product with those new features people are looking for? So you got to understand those motivations to buy. Then ultimately, can you delight your customers, right? One of the examples I love to use in my classes is you look at the old VW Beetles or the new VW Beetles, and they put a bud vase in the dashboard. And that bud vase does not make the car go faster. It does not make the car more fuel efficient, right? And yet it puts a smile on the customer's face. So that was a delightful addition to that product. That is something that you need to be thinking about. How can you actually delight your customers with your product? And ultimately, can you keep them coming back for more? A lot of our audience is in software as a service, or they're doing a service offering of some sort where there's a subscription. And you don't want people to just kind of get into a habit of paying every month and not thinking about it. I mean, you kind of do, but honestly, you want to deliver more value over time. And that's why you think about how does your product evolve and how you keep them coming back for more. And Jen, you want to chime in on any of those?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're talking about building culture, team culture around starting and ending with the customer. This needs to have just instill in the team a very deep sense of needing to really understand those needs and wants of that user and that customer. When I was, I've spent my career back and forth between marketing and product. It has been a long time since I've been in marketing, but the study there, that really instilled in me, the study into the why. Why do people buy? Why do they invest their time? And buying isn't just dollars. Buying is also investing their time. It's also an opportunity cost for them to decide if they're going to solve their problem using your solution or solve their problem using something else. What is the be done? And so when you talk about needs and wants, the psychology of purchasing says that they buy what they want and they justify it with what they need. And so really understanding that is pretty key. And I would say just a steady drumbeat of that with the team over and over again. What is the problem we're solving?
Right. Yeah, it's a very important point. Definitely. We actually got a question that I think maybe I will tackle right now. We got a question from Nate about generally you're using customer synonymously with user, but any tips for when they are not the same? For example, B2B. How do you delight the buyer, customer, and the user? When we can't do both, who wins? Interesting. I don't know about that. When we can't do both, who wins? Interesting.
That is that's the holy grail, right? I've worked on a number of products that have required both a customer who is separate from the user. In academic settings, we see this happen. In lots of times enterprise purchasing, that is what we see happen, right? We have a bunch of buyers who have certain motivations, and we have a bunch of users who have completely different motivations. And sometimes those motivations are in direct conflict with each other. And again, I would say this goes really deeply into really understand what is the outcome that they are all looking for, and really trying to figure out how you match those up. I can perhaps give a little bit of an example there with in the world of medicine, which is the industry that I work in right now. Often a hospital will want something, a hospital organization will want something, guidelines that everyone has to strictly follow, versus the user who are clinicians who are saying, hey, but my patients are all different, right? And I can't necessarily follow, and I don't believe that I should follow the same thing for every single one of them. And so we have a buyer that wants us to standardize this care. We have a user that is concerned about the standardization of that care and the impact on a patient. And so the true innovation then happens with trying to figure out how we can accommodate those pivots for those users, while at the same time providing standards. Okay, if you pivot here, then this is the standard, and if you pivot here, then this is the standard, and in that way we meet both. But it really does take deeply understanding that end customer and the end user. Thank you, Nate, for that distinction.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. I like the idea of you create this standard almost flow, if you will, so that you have that standard, but you also then have the variety of different circumstances or scenarios still laid out to help the actual clinician or the person at the end there who's administering this, right? That's a great example, definitely. In terms of the delight part of this, one thing that I can talk about is the fact that we put a lot of energy at 280 Group into streamlining the purchase flow. So our customers, if you will, are oftentimes product management leaders, right? A VP of product management or director of product management, but the procurement officer or the HR professional who's responsible for professional development is involved as well. And so they're a stakeholder in this B2B experience. So we actually put effort last year into improving our legal flow and payment flow so that we anticipate the top 10 questions that either the HR professional or the procurement officer is going to have, and have all those answers already laid out and ready to go in our onboarding process. And so we've actually gotten positive feedback from these other stakeholders that we were one of the easier vendors to work with. And so that actually did bring delight. And it actually made the job of the VP of product management easier too, because then they didn't have these other stakeholders complaining to them about, hey, this vendor is really hard to work with, or we still haven't gotten our paper signed. We can't start the class until the contract is signed, right? So there is this interplay between stakeholders. And if you identify those things, that's actually how you can bring a delightful experience to that. So I hope, Nate, that helps. I hope that other people think a bigger picture about how to go about delighting the customer. But what I want to do now is move into, as the leader, how are you going to make it real? That in fact, if you want to state that starting and ending with the customer as a part of your team culture, how do you go about making that real? So a couple of tips. And what I'm going to do now is kind of connect these back to the model, the Gartner model, right? So I do encourage you to if you're going to watch this later, you can maybe even take a screenshot of this, or you know what I'll do actually is I'm going to include a link to the Gartner article in the follow-up email so that folks can grab this model and use it, right? So in terms of how do we engage, first and foremost, and you're going to see this one repeated in almost all 10 of them, you're the role model, right? So you, in your questions as a product management leader, are going to always be thinking about the customer, right? So you want to be sure that you're starting from the customer's needs, wants, and desires, for example. So you've got to be the role model there. Secondly, in terms of how we work, it comes back to the anti-pattern, using the agile terminology that I mentioned earlier in my career. If you're going to tell your product managers that they need to understand customers, then you've got to provide them with the resources so they can actually understand customers. So they have the budget for customer visits, or they have the budget to conduct real customer research. Right now, probably visiting customers in this time of the pandemic is less of a priority on your list, but you can certainly Zoom with them, and that's helpful. But you also want to be able to use research tools like conducting a survey, right? And that allows you, and that takes money if you're going to get a professional organization to help you with that. So you'll need to set aside budget as a leader for both customer visits and research. And hopefully next year, we will be able to get back out and be closer with our customers again, shoulder to shoulder with our customers.
I would add with that also, with the providing budget for customer visits and research, also add the bandwidth. If the team does not have the bandwidth to do it, this means prioritization, right? It means clear prioritization. So another way we work is to provide clear prioritization around that so that we can accommodate it.
It's a good point. And even in your processes, right? So that there is a step there, it's pre-sprint zero if we're talking about agile methodology, where there is time to do that research before you have to present your epics to your development team, right? Or if you're in a waterfall process, you still have that stage before the gate that does allow you to gather up your customer research. And that actually connects well to the next point, right? How you go about making decisions. If you make all your decisions without requiring much in the terms of customer research, then the shortcut for the product manager is, I really don't have to do that research. But if every one of your documents requires that you have customer research to fall back on, you've got a data-driven decision that drives why these are the benefits you need, suddenly that's going to become the way your product managers behave, because they're going to have to go get that customer research.
I'm going to give a shout out really quick to my boss right now, who is very, very good at this and has been super diligent in pushing this or demanding this from the entire product team at Elsevier. He has these words in documents that he calls lazy terms. And if a document, and it's like, something like most physicians, la la la, whatever the ending of this, or it's strongly recommended. Well, these are actually really weak words that mean either we haven't done the research or we haven't thought about how to use our research. So in our documents, instead of making those judgment decisions for all of our stakeholders and readers with those lazy words, instead we put in the customer research, we put in the data, and let that data speak for itself.
So then going back to your earlier example, it's no longer most physicians, it's 6 out of 7 physicians, right? You now have the data, right? Great concrete example. Then the other thing is down in the trenches, in your everyday interactions with folks. And these days, those interactions are going to be over Zooms rather than at the water cooler, but talk about your customers every day. if you as the leader are asking questions every day about your customers, and you're encouraging your product managers to talk about customers every day in terms of, I had this call with sales today, or I spent a little time with customer support today and I learned this. Those kinds of conversations will once again get this virtuous cycle going, where talking about our customers every day is just a natural thing. And that's how you want to get that wheel turning, right? And then the last one we have is, it really matters if you actually are paying attention to your customers in the end result of, are they satisfied with your product, right? So there's a number of different ways to do this. The old one was net promoter score, right? Of just asking a question, and it's still a valid mechanism today. But these days, in many of our products, you are allowed, and I talk about software a lot, but I want to talk about physical products too. When you unbox something, there can be a survey right there inside that box with a very simple, quick to type in URL that allows the customer to provide feedback for physical products as well. So there's more than one way to measure customer satisfaction. And in product for a software, you can be asking them questions, or you can actually be measuring usage and seeing whether or not those features and benefits that you thought were most important are the ones getting used most. So again, you have to make sure that you instill this culture of, we've got to make sure we measure whether our customers are happy or not. Anything you want to add on that one?
No, I was trying to read the next question, that somebody has a question, and we'll go back to it. But.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, we'll save some of these questions for when we get to the end, certainly. Great. All right, so I hope then on this first one, start and end with the customer, you're now able to see 5 different ways of how do you, as a product management leader, see some concrete ways to create the environment that enables the behaviors and attitudes that you want, but this really does become part of your culture. All right, over to you, Jen, for number 2.
All right, awesome. And I was glad to see on your first how to make it happen is you are the role model of the last one, because it leads right into leading with influence. There's a quote I love a lot. I think that we've all seen it many times, and I'm just going to read it really quick, and then I'm going to make some comments. So the quote is, if you want to build a ship, don't drum up the men to gather wood, divide the work, and give orders. Instead, teach them to yearn for the vast and endless sea. And that always, to me, has sounded so wonderful and idealistic. And I'm sure that those of you listening are like, well, that's awesome, but how do we translate that into real life? You know, I have a real team with real problems, a real business. I am pushed against the wall really often. How is that really helpful, right? And I have this dual side then, the angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other, saying the devil's in the details, right? But the angel's still saying, but we can achieve this. And I want to talk today about what I have learned in my career about leading with influence. I have made a career really out of developing some pretty strong soft skills. That's really the sweet spot is. I have, over the past 20 plus years, worked as a president of various volunteer organizations, which is an incredibly great training field for any product manager who really wants to learn how to lead with influence, because volunteers, they are not taking a paycheck for doing what you say.
That's a good point.
They are not taking a paycheck at all to accomplish anything. They are following you because they want to, and your job is to figure out how to make them want to follow you. And this is not a story about manipulation. That is not what leading with influence is. Leading with influence is all about how genuine you are and about recognizing others as human beings and providing that inspiration. I have this list here. I'm going to probably talk through the first one. The next 3 give an example. So the first one is I identify those commonalities. You know, that's where I always begin with a new team. I always get to know each individual team member. I will say that leading with influence, there is an investment overhead in the beginning. It is slow going in the beginning, potentially, depending on how skilled you are with leading with influence takes a little bit of time. It's like a bank account. You invest, and then later, when you need to go faster, you can pull on that bank account because you have a team that trusts you, that has confidence in you, that you have listened to, that you understand what's important to them and are able to make those decisions based on that.
Right.
I'm going to give an example around this importance of very quickly with a team building trust, this concept that the more trust you give, the more trust you're going to get back. Also about creating joint ownership, also about compromising wherever possible, because my ideas are not the only ideas. They're not even the only ideas that are going to be successful, and it's really important to understand when to just let someone else's idea prevail. An example of that, one point years back, I was standing up a new program within a company, and that program was to develop a new revenue stream for the company. There was a lot of pressure on that program, a lot of new pressure, and as the head, as the product head of that effort, I thought, I have an idea of how I want to model this program. And of course, there were others within the team who also had ideas of how to model this program. And there was another work stream that was notoriously some contention between product and this other work stream. I know this never happens at any company.
That's right.
Never any contention. We're all smooth sailing, but there was a little bit of historical tension, not necessarily between me and those players, but as I came in new, I knew there was this contention, and this leader of this other work stream said, hey, I have an idea for the model for this. I would like to take the lead on coming up with the first draft on this. And there was that split second in the back of my head that I thought, yeah, but I'm the product owner and I should be setting this. It's me, I own this. And then, kind of thinking about how do we create joint ownership? How do we compromise whenever possible? Is it really important for me to die on this hill, right? And the way that I respond to this right now in this moment is going to send all kinds of signals to everyone on the team about what kind of leader I am. Decided in that moment, this is not the hill I want to die on. It might be more effective if I let that other leader say, this is the first draft of that model, and they may be very open and receptive at that point in time for me to come in and say, okay, but here are the adjustments that I would make. Here's how I think that I would change it. And that is exactly what happened. It came in, surprisingly, it was very similar to what I already had in mind.
Oh, great.
And I was able to say, hey, I think that maybe if we make these tweaks here and these tweaks there, they were completely open and ready to go. And from then on, there was this feeling of we're in this together, we're collaborative, Jen really is listening, we understand. And so those three are super important.
Absolutely.
Just one note then on listening. Say that as Roger's trying to get a word in.
No, I just want to make sure we cover all 5 topics today, but keep going.
Exactly. With listening, particularly, I would think that this skill is particularly important when there is a team member that brings to you a challenge, something is to be overcome. And what I've learned is that if I listen all the way through until they are done with their explaining the challenge, that often they also have a resolution in mind. And they want to tell you that resolution. That's why they're bringing you the challenge. They want to tell you about the resolution. But if you jump in too soon, it takes away that joint ownership. It destroys that feeling that they have that you trust them. All of us have probably been in that situation where a senior manager has just jumped in too early when we're explaining a problem and said, have you tried this? Have you tried this? What about this? What about this? And we all are just rolling our eyes and we're thinking, will you stop talking for a minute so I can tell you? This is an important skill to stop and listen all the way through. If they don't come up with a resolution, then I would go that extra mile then and ask them,
Right.
do you have a resolution?
Absolutely.
And then give your feedback. I think we're going to skip the last couple. Giving credit is like trust.
Mm-hmm.
Give it and it comes right back to you. So
no, these are great points. Absolutely. And all of them are tying into this ability to lead with influence. So now let's talk about how do you go about making it real, right? I think you've already given some good examples there, but let's just kind of cover this.
So let's talk about how we work. And we have talked about this already. We collaborate and we set goals together. I don't know, Roger, if you have anything to add to the how we work.
Now, I think your point about listening ties in here very well, right? If as a leader, you come in with the quarterly goals and say, here they all are, that doesn't get them adopted as effectively as if you say, okay, so what are our goals going to be this quarter? Here's what I think. Here's the first draft. But now I'd like everybody else to start fleshing this out, right? And let's come up together with what, and especially when we talk about metrics, right? How many, in my case, leading marketing right now, how many market qualified leads are we going to generate this quarter? I'm not going to just pick that number. I want the whole team to buy into it by them having influence and setting that goal together. So I think it's a great point.
Completely agree. So then how do we engage? We compromise wherever possible. And actually, if you read the literature on this and on leading with influence, a lot of the literature talks about not just, throw people a bone every once in a while. It is literally every single time you can compromise, you should. Mm-hmm. That's the guidance, and that is how you get that trust, right? That's how you get that feeling of joint ownership. Also giving credit. And mm-hmm. and that last one, coaching. I discovered early in my volunteer presidential days that if I delegate something to someone and they don't know how to do it and they fail, they are less likely to follow me again next time. Mm-hmm. So I need to provide them with the tools to be successful if I'm going to delegate it to them. If I don't, they're not going to follow me next time.
No, it's an excellent point. And with all of these, the interesting dynamic is that the more you give away authority, the more you give away power, if you will, right? The more you compromise, the more you actually are respected as a leader, and the more you actually have more influence and more authority, and you've earned it by leading with influence. So I think these are all fantastic points, and I hope that, again, these give you some concrete ideas, leaders, on how you can then use these techniques to lead your team with influence, but then encourage your product managers to lead their product core teams with influence, because they don't have that direct authority, right? They can't order the director of QA or the team leader on the development team to do stuff. They have to influence every step of the way. And I think these tips will help with that. So
that's what our careers are made on, right?
That's right.
Made with influence, yeah.
Absolutely. So number 3 is stay curious. And as product managers, I've always encouraged my teams to always have a learner's mind, always be learning. And of course, we've already talked about customers, but you want to be learning about your product and your competition and your competitive products. You want to be continuing to learn about your own company, where it's headed and what it wants to do, learning about your own profession, so continuing to grow in your skill set, and even learning about the wider world. All of these things contribute to the importance of, can you, in fact, take stuff from other realms and bring those things in to influence the way your product is going to evolve? I love this quote from Walt Disney, where he talks about the fact we keep moving forward, opening new doors and doing new things because we're curious. And curiosity keeps leading us down new paths. And those new paths are amazing, right? I don't know if there are folks out there who are fans of Disney, but they have definitely discovered whole new ways to entertain over the 50 plus years that they've been at this. And it's been amazing to watch, quite honestly. In terms of curiosity, I always pay attention to advertising and commercials, and I look for, well, what was the thinking behind that commercial, and I encourage my product managers to look at that because as you look at advertising, it's like, okay, so what was the key benefit that they were trying to promote? What was that need that they say their product is going to meet? So it's very interesting to be thinking about things that way. Another quote that I have here is from Harvey McKay. He's written a number of different successful business leadership books. And I'm not going to read the whole quote, but I just wanted to point out that leaders are paying attention, and not just your direct manager, but leaders all around you, right? And those leaders who exhibit curiosity typically are seen as those that are going to be great leaders. And that is the point of this quote from Harvey as well. So how do you create a culture of curiosity? Let's talk a little bit more about that, going back to the Gartner framework. In terms of how we engage, you need to start by being curious, right? So you've got to ask questions of your product managers on a regular basis, but you've also got to be curious about the wider world and bring what you are seeing and learning to the table. At your team leadership meetings, can you be talking about, I saw this or I saw that? This was an interesting take from a competitor. What about this new thing that we just heard about in terms of regulation? So you need to be a curious leader and lead by example again, right? Next up, reward your team whenever you hear something or see something that is what I call serendipity, these little occasions where something pops up, right? But serendipity that your team members are bringing to the table. They're talking about competitive situation, or they're talking about something in a parallel industry. Like, look, I stayed at a hotel and I saw a new way of them providing me service, and I would love to think about how we take that service value and bring it into our own services, right? Completely different from maybe the business you're in, but you're being curious, you're walking through the world, always noticing whole product solutions, always noticing things that might influence the way your own products could evolve, your own services could evolve. How we work? Find ways to cross-pollinate ideas. So this is a proactive one. This is one where you as a leader need to periodically think about, how can I get my team together with another product team? Or how can I get my product team together with a partner out in the industry, outside my four walls, and just have an afternoon session where we cross-pollinate ideas, or we talk about a competitive situation. Whatever the topic may be, bring in new sources of thinking from groups outside your own. And that also will encourage this bigger vision of what we're interested in and create this culture of curiosity. Then, how do you support and enable experiments? So part of curiosity is being able to test things. We'll talk about failure as its own thing next time. It's another area we want to dive into more depth on. But again, with budget, right, and with time, as Jen pointed out earlier, you've got to be able to support and enable the opportunity to conduct experiments. And then lastly, you can even make this a metric in your team. Track and report new ideas. At 280 Group, we do a lot of work on change management, and we talk about innovation. And folks say, oh, innovation is such this woolly, again, another amorphous topic. How do you actually get people to innovate? Well, one technique that has come from the industry is actually have an idea box. These days, it can be a Google form, right? But you can actually have a way for people and to do it anonymously or to put their name to it, to track and report new ideas that are being submitted. And in particular, from product managers or from other parts of the organization, have this suggestion box form be available for everybody to use. Again, you're signaling to your whole team that you are rewarding out of the box thinking, you're rewarding curiosity, and you're rewarding it widely across the whole organization. So how you go about measuring this is one of the ways to go about that. I don't know, Jen, if you have any thoughts you want to throw in here.
Yeah, I have a couple of good takeaways, I think, from this. Number one is we don't have innovation without curiosity. We don't solve problems without curiosity. The other is, I like what you have to say about cross-pollinating ideas, because for me, a lot of times innovation comes, something new comes out of the combination of two or more existing things. We see this happen in the creation of stories and literature. That's the truth, right? We also see that in product, and that's really exciting. It's still innovation if we're taking two separate ideas and combining them to make something new. And that's a great well of a treasure trove of ideas there that others have already come up with.
So we got two more topics, and I do want to leave time for questions, but we also have a poll. So let's conduct this poll real quick and see how folks think about, I'm launching the poll now, right? How do you go about measuring, how, our teams celebrate when, and I'll let you read these answers out. Maybe Jen, you can't see them. I don't know if you can or not.
Sorry, yes. We celebrate when we finish a project on time. We finish a project under budget, when we have reached a measurable outcome, or when we've worked lots of overtime.
Right. And there are times when that celebration is well deserved.
Some of those are cheeky, right?
True, but I've certainly done that. I must admit, celebrating when there was a lot of overtime because you're recognizing that extra effort that was put into things, right? But good point, right? Okay, so I'm going to close the poll and share the results. So no surprise here. I think we have a pretty well-aligned team here, Jen. Number one was 74% said that we celebrate when we have reached a measurable outcome, 74%, right? 22% said we finish a project on time is when we celebrate, 2% when we finish a project under budget, and 2% we have worked lots of overtime. So good alignment.
Yeah, I'm going to pause there for just a second on that poll. I don't know if you can go back, but I would say that there isn't a correct answer here. I know that all of us we're so deeply ingrained in when we have reached an outcome. Yes, that is the true celebration. But I think there is a place for, as you said, if we worked a lot of overtime, celebrations during that time can keep spirits up. We're not celebrating the fact that we did work overtime, though, and we're not celebrating the fact that we have achieved an output, right? I think that's the big difference, right? And so I wasn't really trying to put a trick question there. I just genuinely wanted to know how the group felt about that. But there are 3 ugly truths about, or powerful truths about output, I will say. And those are those 3 bullets there. Overtime does not inspire gratitude. I have spoken with a number of, I've mentored a number of product managers, and really, I harp on that a lot when a product manager will say, I'm working all these hours. And I would say, be super careful about that. Be super careful about that, because no one is going to remember next year all this overtime you worked. But all that overtime is bringing you to an outcome. I'm a hard worker. I work a lot, but I'm always that outcome, right? And I'm not giving myself a pat on the back for having worked really long hours. I give myself a pat on the back if I achieve an outcome, right? And my boss is going to remember, my users are going to remember next year if I achieve that outcome. Checking boxes will not create job satisfaction. So if we managers are celebrating the checking these boxes for our teams, that is not going to create a sense of team satisfaction and morale. Now, the truth around output is velocity will not make our customers and users fall in love. Speed to market is awesome, but it's not awesome if it's not achieving an outcome. They will only fall in love if we've achieved an outcome. And so what we're really looking at here is, yes, outputs are important, but only when they are contributing to creating outcomes. And those outcomes are pointed directly at specific impacts. And so the questions we should be asking ourselves all the time: what is the impact you're looking for? And how will you know you have succeeded? Those 2 questions, really important.
So in the interesting time, I'm just going to go and animate all of these for you real quick.
Great. I'm going to take like 1 minute because we're out of time. So we work, all of our goals are outcome oriented. I have a whole topic on that, Roger. Maybe someday we'll do another webinar on performance reviews and outcome performance reviews.
Love it. I'm writing that down.
And how we engage Of course, we celebrate those outcomes and not the outputs, and we measure those outcomes through KPIs and OKRs. And whether that's for a team or for an individual performance review, we measure those outcomes.
Absolutely.
Objectivity there.
Yes, definitely. And all of these things, again, are concrete ways to make sure that you put the focus in the right place, right? All right, last topic, being expert. So a PM's authority flows from her or his expertise. And these bullets, I'm not going to go over them now, but you as a product manager, and now I'm talking about the individual product manager, should always know these things, right? So then you as a product management leader need to be encouraging your product managers to make sure that they know all of these different points, right? Ultimately, and I've told my product managers on every team I've ever led, your ultimate goal, you know you've arrived as a real product manager when you're the go-to person that everyone comes to ask questions about the product, to ask questions about the market, to ask questions about the customer's needs, right? But, and I love this quote from John Wooden, right? Another amazing coach. It's what you learn after you know it all that counts. And so you've got to, and I hope you get the humor there, right? You've got to be honest and say, look, I don't know. When someone asks you a question, don't be afraid to say, I don't know, and then follow up immediately with, I will find out, right? And balance that with that previous attribute of staying curious, right? So be expert, know all of these things, be well-versed in these things, but always be open to new ideas, right? And to Jen's earlier point about, taking the idea from somebody else and letting that become what drove building up collaboration, right? So as a leader, how do you go about doing this? You got to be expert yourself, right? First and foremost in the product management skills. So if you don't have that, then get some formal training for sure. And as a leader, right? Be an expert in leadership. And you're attending today, and I'm happy to see that you're here because hopefully that's helping you grow your skill set as a leader, right? Ask tough questions. If you don't let people skate by with simple answers, to Jen's earlier point, it's not good enough to say most positions agreed with this. You want to get to that number, right? 6 out of 7 positions did this, right? So ask the tough questions that encourage people to dig deeper, right? Again, encourage cross-training and team swaps. I worked for a company actually where we would swap out every 6 months, and this was with developers, but you can do the same thing with product managers. Swap out product managers across different teams. Help them get a different understanding of a whole different product for 6 months. And then they're going to come back with some amazing new expertise that they can bring to the team. And support and fund professional development. Once again, it's in the budget. If you're going to talk about being expert, you've got to have dollars set aside so people can go get training, right? In new areas in particular, especially these days with digital transformation going on, becoming more data-driven. Maybe you want to learn about product-led growth, right? And lastly, recognize and reward certifications. Those are marks that will show that folks are not only getting that knowledge, but they have that attitude that they want to improve, right? And when you reward that attitude, then everybody on the team is going to be striving for those areas for improvement. All right, well, I hope that you've learned in our first 5 today, you've learned the power of team culture. You've learned a little bit about how to shape it using the Gartner framework. We talked about the first 5 successful elements of PM culture and how you build up or how you go about shaping your team. You now have, I hope, some concrete examples of how to go about doing this with your team. All right, next month, we will come back and talk about part 2 in November. But now I'm going to conduct this poll, and we've got time to answer maybe 1 or 2 questions before the hour. So let me get the poll started just to get some feedback. Again, we're a learning organization, so we want to know how effective this was. Let me go to a question here. Okay. Outcomes matter. I remind my team members it's not about being busy, it's about achieving results. Okay, that was just a comment. Let's see here. Can you cover product culture through an evolving organization? For example, in an organization that's growing quickly. Interesting question. Jen, you want to touch on that one, or you want me to take it?
Why don't you go ahead and take it, and I'll take the next one.
Yeah, so I've actually been through organizations where I was number 7, and then we grew to several hundred, and I was number 98, and we grew to 2,000. And it's a wild ride, I've got to admit, right? It's very hard when your culture and your company is evolving, even sometimes through acquisitions or just through organic growth. And the thing that I really emphasize here is, and we're actually going to provide this as a tool for you next month, is print something out on your wall that takes the bullets here. And I'm not saying the 5 we talked about today or the 5 we talked about next time are going to all be perfect fits for you. But print out the 5 or 10 or whatever 3 that are most important to you and put them in front of your face. And even now, when we're all virtual, I have a couple of things up on my wall here in my home office that are reminders to me of what really matters. And so as your culture is evolving, go back to those touchstones and make sure that you're touching base on them and making sure you're not drifting away from these things, and you're consciously bringing people back to the things that matter. And then also be curious about, are those still the right 3 or 4 things now that we've evolved in this new way, after this acquisition, with a new ability that we want to take advantage of? Then maybe it's time to draw a line through one and update it. So it's going to have to be a living document, but it's something that if you have in front of your face on a regular basis, it's going to help you check in and make sure your culture is what you want it to be. Great question. I'm sorry that we don't have time for more questions. I want to close the poll. All right, and one thing that I want to do is just invite you. We did a little bit of Q&A. We have another webinar coming up next week, and this is a joint webinar with AIPMM, and I will put the link on into our chat box for you to be able to join that webinar. Sign up for 5 career-damaging mistakes to avoid in your first 100 days. But I want to thank Jen Cano for joining us today, and she'll be back next month with me, and we'll go over the second set of 5 tips. And I hope in this coming intervening month, you take the time to figure out, how can I go about putting into action any one of these 5 tips to start evolving my culture to be a more effective product management team. Thanks for joining us today, everyone. Have a great day and a great rest of your week. Thanks, Jen.
Thank you, Roger. Thanks, everyone.
All right.